Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting startup founders share their stories and strategies. They also deliver tangible lessons learned along the way that you can apply to your own startup. Each episode is a true masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my special guest today is Zeb Anderson. Zeb, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
So we were chatting just for a moment offline before we hit the big red record button, and I said, Zeb, what's that short for? And he's what did you say it was short for again?
Zebediah.
Zebediah, yeah. But we thought, you can make up whatever you want it to be short for. So
That's right. That's right.
It could be some sci-fi name. It could be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly. And I love sci-fi books, so maybe I'm going to stick with that.
There you go.
That's a really good way to look at it.
We're going to see a series on Amazon somewhere, and the hero of the story is Zebulon or something like that. But
I'll take it. Man,
thanks again for joining us today. But so if you and I met at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
That's a great question. I like to say that I'm a lifelong computer nerd. Always been interested in how you can use technology to just keep things simple and especially as it impacts things like the law, which I'm for my sins also an attorney. It's a little bit behind the times on what they do. So my most recent entrepreneurial endeavor is to basically try to make that process simpler for people to try to find an attorney. And that's the startup gig that I've been working on for about 2.5 years now, called LegalQ. And that's me in a nutshell. I love here in Minneapolis, the winters are terrible, but the summers are kind of nice. So, we get a little bit of both. I have 2 amazing kiddos, and love to spend, any time when I'm not toiling over the startup with them. And that's kind of me in a nutshell.
So you live in the land of 10,000 lakes up in Minnesota, but so you hear the word like democratization of fill in the blank. Is that kind of the theme of what you were trying to do with legal services as well?
I love that. That's exactly it. Yeah, because it's to your point. It's actually I think legal gets in its own way a lot of the times. Mm-hmm. There's this saying, high margins cover a lot of sins, right? And basically, if you have a high margin product out of the gate, there's not a lot of incentive for you to innovate on that. And sometimes it takes a global pandemic and a scrappy startup to get a kick in the pants to kind of move that democratization along a little bit. And by the way, I am an attorney. I don't want to minimize how hard it is to do that work. And there's so many amazing attorneys out there that truly want to help people and went to law school to be an advocate. And, the reason I went personally is to help, conflict resolution. How do we do that better and use technology to help with that? And I just think that, what I mentioned earlier, it sometimes takes a little bit of external motivation to help that process forward.
I could not agree more. And I mean, it just kind of hearing your story just in the last few minutes, I'm thinking, okay, so there were 2 paths that he could have taken. He could have possibly taken to get where he is today. So assuming that the origin story is you went to law school and you worked in that profession in some capacity for a while. So we can agree on that. That's home base, so to speak.
That's mostly it. Yeah.
Corporate, private, practice firm, whatever. So
right.
Then you came at a fork in the road, and as Yogi Berra says, when you come to a fork in the road, you take it. But so the idea that either you hated what you did and you had to do something else, or you kind of had to scratch an itch that you had, and maybe it's some combination of those 2. So this is your story. I'm curious to hear your version.
Kevin, I think you have a second career as a psychologist because you nailed it. It's a little bit of both. Yeah, honestly, it's post law school, I worked at a big med tech company called Medtronic, and they had 90,000 employees, I think, at the time.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
I had some interesting roles within my jobs there, but ultimately, it's truly, and this is a personal preference. If this works for you, God bless. But, for me, it's just, I always felt like, kind of stifled from what you could ultimately do. And it's a great company. I don't want to, minimize anything that they do, but ultimately, it's, to your point, you kind of have that itch to scratch for starting up something. And ultimately, it gave me a lot of great worldviews on how, some of these big, industries like healthcare or legal have a lot of inefficiencies that if, you can see a better mousetrap or a better way to do things, then might as well give it a try. And, it's, we actually, so the idea was kind of the summer and fall of 2019. So right before the pandemic. And to be honest, the pandemic actually was a little blessing in disguise because,
For sure.
Everybody was working from home. And so my nights and weekends I could spend, toiling away at LegalQ while I was still working there at my day job. And it allowed for that kind of innovation to happen until last summer when we got into this accelerator called Techstars. And that allowed me to jump ship and do it full time since then.
So, okay, now it's confession time. You walk through the world. So here I'm moved from psychologist to priest here. So
let's do it.
So, okay, I'm curious, and it's interesting because I have so many colleagues and friends that have shifted kind of to a remote work area or remote work setting. So it tends to gray your day job too. I mean, even the time during the day probably tends to be a little more gray. So I mean, you very judiciously said nights and weekends, but did you actually see like even the day got to be a little cloudy on, you're working on this or you're working on that or whatever? And I'm not trying to catch you and have Medtronics like charge you back for wages, but it does seem like that
Medtronic owns half the company now. No, I'm kidding.
Even the way we work seems different.
Yeah.
And I think so employers are they're not, I mean, they're wise to some of those things too. And they understand that it's a changing landscape, So it is you're folding laundry while you're answering an email, type thing. So it's an interesting new landscape.
It's a great question
on that, just remote work in general. So we chase a little rabbit here.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, there were lunch breaks when I would, switch computers, jump on and maybe one of the benefits of being a lawyer is I knew, I had to be very delineated in those kind of work streams. But I have friends that legitimately have, a couple of side gigs at any given time and, kind of a 9 to 5. And even the, employees at LegalQ, I know, I think 3 or 4 of them that have, pretty consistent either fractional roles in other companies or are just, able to, kind of have that side hustle mentality. And I think to your point, it's kind of the new normal in a lot of ways. And, I think that's healthy from a sense of you can kind of take ownership of your own career path and your own, trajectory on that side. I do think it hurts productivity just in all the context switching that you have to do on some of those different things. But ultimately, I'm in favor of it because, it sure beats having, all the capital expense of buildings and different, we all just we work, if we need to get together, we just, share a conference room for a few hours. And that's been a lot more flexible. And I think it does create innovation because, we have an incredible team that's dispersed right now. And, we probably couldn't find all of them in Minneapolis, to be honest,
Oh, I'm absolutely. I think it would, deepen the gene pool of hiring as, if you're not geographically limited.
Exactly.
That certainly is a huge, you talk to HR professionals that are saying, we can, the the ability or the reach to talent, the reach into talent pools,
Yeah.
is
Yep.
exponentially, more broad. And so let's talk about LegalQ just a bit, and give us the basic business model of LegalQ. You and I are hopping on an elevator. We're going to go up to the floors. Give me your 45-second kind of brief rundown of LegalQ and maybe who it's for.
I love it. Yeah. So let me get your button quick here. And LegalQ is an app that connects users to attorneys for a 15-minute free consultation. They can do text, voice, or video chat. And attorneys use the platform to find potential clients. They have, just based on our historical data, about 1 in 5 turn into, a paying client that if they do a good job with, that's just the better way to connect with potential clients and also do some good in the process by, giving these people a path forward to their next legal steps. There's a stat by the ABA that says that 2/3 of Americans have an ongoing legal issue at any given time. Mm-hmm. And just let that sink in, like that's close to 200 million people that have some type of legal issue. And it's a scary number, and we're hoping to help the cause on that a little bit.
So, okay, the elevator doors open, man. I'm still intrigued here. So I'm just going to hit the emergency stop button, and we're just going to stand here in the elevator for a while, because now you generated a lot more questions. So that's a really interesting business model. So that would require you to go out and talk to attorneys and really sell them on the idea that this is an effective lead gen strategy.
You nailed it.
That's kind of that would be the business model. It says you will get, on average, you will land, you will, I guess, sign 1 out of 5, people you talk to for. So every 75 minutes you're on the phone, you will land another client type thing. Yep. But the interesting, as I'm thinking about other models would be, when I first looked at it online, I didn't drill down deep enough to get to the final strategy there. But when I was looking at it, it was like, okay, you can connect me to attorneys, and I'm thinking they'll all have different rates, and LegalQ just takes a cut. They get 15% of, and they bill it through the app. They keep 15%, send 85% to the attorney, and man, everybody's happy, and it's kind of on-demand legal services type thing. So, but it's a really interesting model. How did you arrive at that one versus, either the one I described or even option 3?
Honestly, Kevin, that's a brilliant question, because we got it completely wrong at the start. We had a assumption that we did 100 interviews with attorneys, with users, different people in that process. But our first assumption was that users would want to pay, I think our numbers were like $39 for 15 minutes, $59 for 30 minutes with a licensed attorney in their jurisdiction that they can just ask any of these questions to. And what we discovered was people would, could get into the funnel pretty well, and then everybody would drop off at the paywall. So basically, 95% or so people would do that. And we started asking more questions about that. And the attorneys were like, hey, it's cool that I could make, to your point, whatever the percentage breakdown that we get from that. Mm-hmm. But ultimately what I want is somebody that turns into a long-term client for this. And so we kind of re-engineered who pays for what. And now and to be honest, it's closer to our mission, which is access to justice. And, that's what we stand for. So giving it free for the users as a way to just explore it, get those legal questions solved. We tell the attorneys, like, don't hide the goods, give it to them in the call. Otherwise, we're going to have a hard conversation. But it's, from that lens, but also if they do a good job, they have a potential lifelong client. And so we basically got it completely wrong, switched it in once we were in market, and this is our current path forward. And it's knock on wood, starting to get some success in that side, and we've been really grateful. And I guess if my learning from that is just don't assume that you have the answers. Talk to the customers before you build the product that you assume. And my hubris got in the way on that one, and should have listened first, and then not have to build 30% more of the product to get it to that.
My daughter was pre-law in her undergraduate degree, and was on the mock trial team at the university she was in. So
Nice.
I can attest to the fact that you don't get through that process without a little hubris. So I mean, I think that's like a basic requirement of, so
Fair point.
Interesting as you're you're talking about I guess the transition of the model, early days, but it's, we hear the word pivot so often, like, it's like a correction.
Yeah.
Actually, it may just be an improvement. Yours was just like, instead of, you didn't like do a 180. I mean, you really just enhanced the funnel where it would be more effective. So, I mean, I think if we're not improving and we're not enhancing and we're not, making positive pivots, then we're probably not growing at all. And we're probably leaving some flesh on the bone, so to speak, somewhere along that pathway. But so how, you talk about going through Techstars, and which is, that in itself is quite an accomplishment, because I mean, those are major incubators, Y Combinator and Techstars, and those that you've heard about, and a lot of times unicorns come out of there. And so is LegalQ going to be is it the Uber of legal services?
Uber of legal. That's I'm going to be stealing that. So congrats on your royalty check coming out. But no, that's our goal. Like, truly, like, because so two things. First, one is I love the Techstars program. Our MD, she was amazing, and truly, you learn so much about just the operation side of the business that you kind of boot camp for growing up really quick as a startup, and that's just invaluable, right? There's so many beautiful things that, from anything from like your OKR KPI check-ins to just understanding how you can grow efficiently and effectively on your marketing side, but also your team, and what impacts not thinking about strategy has versus just saying so tactical every day, and so many beautiful things from that process. To be honest, when we exited it, we were probably a little early still for most seed stage investors. So we did our kind of pre-seed round with them, and with investors and angels, and raised about 500K in the pre-seed side, and then basically just put that towards the product, put it towards growing the market. And now we're in a second accelerator called Launch with Jason Calacanis and their crew over at This Week in Startups. And we have the goods this time. So we have the traction, we have the product, we have the team, and now it's been fun to kind of have that different conversation with the VCs. And I've literally talked to, I think I counted the other day, it was like 123 different VCs over the past year, and heard no's from most of them. I'll take that back. You never hear no's. It's always, this is really, really interesting. We love your team, your product. Like, talk to me when you hit 10K MRR. You know what I mean? And so it's leaves the door open for them, which is fair. It's part of the game. But it is exciting to kind of have the traction behind it this time as we have these conversations. And to your question, it's a step function of what we hope to do with the mission, right? Is if we can get, all these people access to justice along the way, the monetary side makes sense to keep increasing with that. And hopefully, that's a global endeavor someday, not just in the States, but over time. That's what we hope to grow into.
So you could very easily, I think, find yourself in like competing ethos here, where you're really trying to grow and scale, but yet you have kind of a driving force, that says we really do want to provide services that are accessible to the people that need it the most, type thing. So often those are competing values,
right?
Those are like counterintuitive values. So how are you keeping that balance, in your DNA, I guess, so to speak, or in your vision?
Honestly, I've never been asked that question, and it's a beautiful insight, because it's the thing that keeps me up at night, right?
I am a trained psychologist.
Oh, okay. Well,
No.
remind me to.
I just play one on the radio. That's
I like it. I like it. It's a great question. It's probably one of the things I struggle with the most, if I'm honest, because I see these consultations come through, with respect to privacy, but some of them are heartbreaking, and I want everybody to get access to justice. But at the same point, if, I don't know, 30% of the consultations that you send the attorney, or 50 or whatever, are just people that, are unable to be in a position to be a client for them because of the payment, it's a tricky balance. And I think, so the two things that we're kind of doing to mitigate that is, number one, we have different channels that we use to get the users, and some of those we can kind of optimize for different, different spending groups, different, people that might be able to get those leads to the attorneys that have higher chances of becoming a client. And the second thing is for the ones that don't, we're working on integrating a system into the back end of LegalQ that says, if this consultation doesn't turn into a paying client, or if you know that it's going to be kind of a pro bono work, you can actually use that to track through LegalQ, because a lot of firms have pro bono requirements, and some states even have a certain amount of pro bono hours you need to fulfill for becoming or being a licensed attorney. So between those two things, it's kind of mitigating some of that. So we have benefits to the attorneys on both sides.
Okay, so this is where I'm really going to require some royalty payments. So I had a couple of crazy brainstorm ideas as you were. I am a like schizophrenic, entrepreneur here. So
love it.
Two things that came to mind when you were talking about. Number one is like, what about a model like, say, Tom's shoes or Bombas socks or something like that, where you're like, you do have a paywall or pay side. But yet it kind of funds maybe a pro bono side that kind of runs in parallel to that. The second thing is, if you ever really, see the flywheel take off, for LegalQ, you may want to create a fund where people can petition to that fund to be reimbursed for legal fees, and that may be your foundation side or your 501c3 side, out of the back end of things that you can kind of feed back into the system, the ability for attorneys to give back. And you can also work with, I guess, with foundations that are out there that are legal foundations that can provide those services, maybe pro bono as well. Maybe you partner with those as well. But just crazy ideas, because I really love the idea of having, the ability to, democratization isn't just aimed at one channel or one strata, I guess, of our economic model, and you can use different stratas to support and subsidize, I guess, other, the ones that need that particular help. But I really love the model, and tell me, when exactly did you start LegalQ, and what's been kind of the growth pattern since the beginning?
Yeah, no, I just want to say those are brilliant ideas, Kevin. And I'm literally going to send this to all of our product team to make sure we think about that. And
I'm $9 an hour. I'm really high.
Keep the clock rolling.
That's right.
One quick thought on kind of the model, the way it is there's a lot of regulatory capture within the legal industry. And one of the negative aspects of that is a legal entity can't split fees with a non-legal entity. So like us as a C Corp can't share, 20% with the attorney that's licensed in a state. And most states have a flavor of this. And so basically, to that end, that was another big reason why we switched the model, but also to your point, if it's going towards a charitable cause, then there might have some optionality on how to do that better. So Thank you for that idea. I love that. And to your question, it started in the summer of 2019, started kind of coming up with an idea around what this could be, and wrote a way too long business plan as part of that, just to kind of get some thoughts on paper. And that's what I used as to share amongst all the attorneys that I was asking about the questions. And we did a bunch of design thinking sessions with them, and then beyond that had I think I just used Fiverr to, and that, to be honest, I'm really lucky. Like, that's one of the, I'd rather be lucky than good kind of saying, but it's true. And I found this amazing designer on Fiverr, and she was able to kind of take the ideas of what it was and give some mock-ups that really allowed for us to get some critical feedback of, does this work? Does this not? And even then, as I mentioned earlier, I still overbuilt way too much in the product, but it's good, kind of momentum to keep that moving. And basically in that time period, started thinking of who co-founders might be. How do we get our go-to-market established? How do we get the initial funding for this to get the prototype built, and all those fun pieces.
So what's been kind of the growth pattern since 2019? So when you're talking about staffing, I don't know if you want to talk about revenue numbers, but it's completely up to you. This is your show, so you share whatever you want to share.
No, thank you. And it's been fits and starts, to be honest. We have some amazing team members on today, but and I was just talking to our CFO about this at lunch. The biggest challenge of a startup is just the war of attrition, right? Like, can you stick around long enough to see the progress get to the place where you have a V1, or you get some, enough funding where you can build into the strategy around it. And, we lost some good people along the way and gained some more. And, that's another hard part about the startup is, different people at different timetables and different expectations for how long things are going to take. And but that said, we, I think we really honed in on the product as it is today, this last fall. So, we kind of went through different iterations through fall, winter 2019 into 2020. And then use that time to kind of develop the markets a little bit, develop the product around that. And then when we got into Techstars, that's when we kind of switched the business model to the new version. And since then, it's been able to kind of to expand. And one of the things that, I don't know if it was right or wrong yet, I'll let you know, I guess, but is I was pretty adamant that we don't charge either side until we have a product worth its salt, right? So I think we've had like 7,000 downloads of the app, have about 150 attorneys on the platform today, and we just turned on kind of the revenue side of it last month. And so, we don't have a lot of revenue until, this past month, but I didn't want, people to pay for kind of an MVP. I wanted it to be a V1, and, I was subsidizing a lot of attorney activity on the platform for a long time, but we also got a ton of great data from that. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. So
I can imagine the app makes the connection, sets up the initial 15-second or 15-minute consultation. How does it track beyond that? So is the conversation does it remain within the app? So you're monitoring that, or, I mean, how do you keep it from going offline, I guess, at that point?
Yeah. As of now, we encourage them to take it offline after the consultation. So we send both sides an email kind of summary of the pieces of the consultation. And based on that, if the user likes the attorney, they can choose to go with them. If they don't, or they want to try a different one, maybe get a second opinion, they can do that as well. And, long term, we probably will have some more features around, just for simplicity's sake, keeping those conversations active through LegalQ. And we have some kind of interesting AI potential capabilities with that too, around If you think about it, right, like these are the, say, 5,000 latest questions in Virginia that were asked about XYZ topic around criminal law. Here's the best answers for them. Emphatically creating a corpus for a machine learning algorithm to say, hey, attorneys, here's the best answer for these kind of questions. You look like a genius because you're able to answer, add your color to it and answer it pretty quickly to users. And but that's a little bit down the road. We're trying to stay laser focused on just growing responsibly, I guess, right now. And there's a lot of like middle pieces of the funnel that I've been learning that are really challenging at this stage. Just how do you onboard effectively? How do you manage expectations effectively? How do you just get the flows in the right order so that you can automate some of those steps? And can your CRM do some of this? Can you enable the onboarding process automatically? But it's pretty duct tapey at the moment, I'd say. But we're working on kind of automating all those pieces.
You'd probably be surprised how many apps that have been around for a long time are not very duct tapey behind the curtain. So
that's fair.
But I'm guessing the model is that the attorneys pay maybe a monthly subscription fee or something like that, or is it based on actual connections that are made?
Yeah, so that's another differentiation we made. One of the feedback pieces we got from the attorneys was they hate the online subscriptions that they tap to for some of the incumbents in the market. And if they have to pay, $1,100 a month for lead services or like SEO services that after talking to a bunch of attorneys were great for the first 2 months and then dropped quite a bit. And then were astounding the last 11 and 12 months of that contract. We just, basically once said, turn it on, turn it off when you want it. You can pay by the consultation. So if you want, 20 that week, we'll do our best to try to get you up to that. And then if we send you 15, then we'll just charge you for the 15 that we sent you at the end of the week. And if you have any disputes on it, we can work through that as well. But basically, it's just the fairest way to do it, I think. It's send them the value for what they use. And if they want to shut it off or on vacation or something for a week, then they shouldn't have to pay for that.
So I can see three big needs that you would have right now. Number one is just development, just app development needs. I can also see, business development where you're trying to onboard attorneys, and that is, that's a learning curve in itself. Just trying to educate them on the value of this kind of new model, and then you've got to drive people to the app. You got to drive people to the service itself. So, is that who you're hiring in those three primary areas, or how are you building your staff?
You are very insightful. Those are pretty much the three areas right now that we're going after. So, kind of bringing some of the IT capabilities and development work a little bit closer to home, and understanding just how we can drive the most efficiency from that process. And the second thing is basically, to your point, kind of like sales team to help enable the kind of mid-funnel pieces and top of funnel. And then customer success, like the onboarding side of things, and just ensuring that we're getting the right feedback from the customers to help inform the product, to help inform the engineers, and kind of get that life cycle going. So you nailed it. Those are the top three.
Well, it's pretty. I mean, I'm certainly not Rain Man here, so it's pretty obvious of I would say the kind of high level needs that you would have at this stage of your development. But it hasn't been all that long that you've been kind of a CEO, founder, co-founder, or whatever. But we all learn lessons along the way, and I would love for you to share just a couple. This is an area of the interview we call the mentor moment. Where I really want you to share one or two insights that you've learned that you wish you would have known. When you first started out, it would have saved you a lot of time, money, effort, heartache. You fill in the adjective there, but the whole idea of like there are people behind you on the journey that are thinking about starting things. What are one or two things that really stand out in your mind?
I love this question. Number one is, as I mentioned earlier a little bit, you have to get the customer feedback before you build your product. I did this in the opposite order a little bit. We did some design thinking sessions, but it's still overbuilt by far. And without that customer feedback of, I would actually use this and or buy it, or subscription or what have you, you're ultimately trying to be Steve Jobs, and that's very, very few humans on the earth that can do that effectively. And I think just having the humility to say, we got this part right, that's great. We found an insight, or we are in this industry and, see the inefficiencies in this workflow. Start small with that and see if, other customers can reflect that back to you as a need that they would have. And ultimately, the great thing about that is they have ownership of the process, right? The customers literally are telling you, like, yes, I would pay you for this feature or that thing. And sometimes they get a little bit niche kind of for, their maybe specific need or use case, but as long as it's fairly generally applicable, and you can tell this customer, hey, this is your direct insight that led us to building this product or part of the product. I think that's just, you got a lifelong client after that. And
certainly a fan for life. Yeah. What else?
Totally.
What else comes to mind?
I think the second thing is you got to take care of your mental health. This has been something I've struggled with quite a bit, actually, is, startups are lonely. Startups are very long roads of just time with you and your own thoughts. And, if you have 123 VCs telling you no all the time, and let alone customers and
exactly
the status quo of, what the current situation is, it's a really hard grind. And I think I didn't appreciate just how truly arduous that is until I got, especially during a pandemic. But that aside, it's just, you got to take care of your mental health. If that's, talking to a therapist, highly recommend that. Find some outlets that are outside of your team. Like, I think you can have healthy discussions with your team, but at the same point, you need other outlets to just be your best worker self, that you can do it. And I think just there's a lot of days when I probably wasn't as effective as I could have been if I would have taken care of my mental health a little bit better. And I just, I've seen it through Techstars, through so many different legal other startups and different cohorts of startups that I've done or been a part of with. And it's a perennial struggle for everybody doing it, but it's I don't know if it's talked about enough, though. You got to find outlets to be healthy with that.
Those are great insights, and I think there have some universal value and truths in those, regardless of, it is industry agnostic, as you're looking at that. But you mentioned earlier, I just want to circle back just really quick on something you talked about, talking to VCs, and you mentioned it 2 or 3 times during our chat here, and angel investors, and you hear kind of in the macro sense that VCs are kind of recoiling a little bit. Money was so easy. In 2020 or whenever it was, it was everywhere. And what's been your experience, even say early 2022, related to venture capital?
Yeah, it's definitely impacted in, I think, 2 ways. One, the valuations aren't what they were in 2021 or 2020. The 100x revenue multiples of a startup are just not there anymore, and which is, I think, a healthy thing for the ecosystem.
Certainly, probably more realistic.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, even a lot of these big companies at scale, just couldn't justify the growth metrics that were put upon them. And honestly, it's a lot easier to hire somebody if you can tell them, hey, our growth multiple is only 2x or 3x versus we have a potential for a 10x growth multiple. So your options are worth quite a bit more. So I think that's a healthy piece. I think the the section of VC that got hit the hardest is growth by far, just because they had these crazy multiples and they had to justify it with actual numbers. On the seed side, we haven't been hit as hard, I think, just because the scale is different, right? Mm-hmm. If you put 2 million into 10 seed companies, that's, 1 or 2 growth stage companies at the same stage. So I think the valuations are lower, but also I haven't seen as much worry about explicitly not getting funded. I think the conversations are harder, definitely, than last year. I think that's fair too. But at the same point, a little more diligence, a little bit more, just proof in the pudding of your numbers has to be there before the VCs will take it seriously. But I think it's healthy for the ecosystem.
And it's almost like it has sometimes an inverse relationship. It seems like where you look at as they're looking at alternative investments, they're thinking, man, I'm losing money everywhere else. I mean, right. Why not? Why not move some money over into venture capital or venture investment type thing, and versus seeing the stock market lose 15% over the last month and a half or whatever it was. But it's just interesting. It's always and it's much easier to see it from outside because I don't have I have no vested interest in what happens. It's like I'm just a spectator. But then as we close today, is there anything we haven't touched on that you would just like to kind of close this out with today that is kind of burning on your mind and heart, and maybe just tell people finish up with the best place to find you online?
I love our chats, Kevin. Thank you so much. Truly, you've been a great host. And I think just back to the advice on the founder side, if you do take the time to take care of your mental health on that journey, and you find yourself in a leadership role in a startup, a lot of what that truly is, and like what I enjoy most about it is just helping the people on your team through those issues and through the problems that you see along the way. And it's a lot of just life stuff that happens that you have to help your teammates, your name your work partner, whatever you want to call it, to their best work. And I just think that that's a lot easier to do when your own mental health is in a good space to do that. And so I just highly recommend that. And if you want to check out LegalQ, you can go to LegalQ.io, and we have a download there for the user side, and we also have a form for the attorneys if they want to check it out. It is
LegalQ.io, not LegalQ.com. So remember that web address.
We're working on that part.
We will certainly have that in the show notes. And Zeb, I really appreciate you taking the time, and what a way to kind of end our week here, and as we head into another nice weekend. But thank you again for just sharing your story and just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Zeb, have a great weekend.
You too, Kevin. Thanks so much.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.